Hey, welcome and thanks for joining us today for our discussion presented on the CC&G member webcast channel. That's a channel now serving over 8,000 contact center and customer care folks. And we dedicate our content on here to discussion over presentation. Yes, that's my voice. This is David Hadabis, so bear with me today. I'm working through some stuff. I'll do my best to speak as clearly as possible. My job here is to facilitate our discussion today with you, our live audience, and with our member, Noel Roberts. Noel is the CTO and VP of Marketing with Aria Solutions. And some of you may have participated in past CC&G programs with Noel, so we're happy to have him back and happy that you're with us today as well for our discussion. We're going to be focusing today's topic all around on how organizations can arm their agents with the right tools and processes to provide great customer engagements. For those of you who are new to CC&G, we're a professional peer network for contact center and customer care management. North of 25 years we've been doing this, discussing topics focused on process improvements, staff challenges, the impact of changing technology, and much more. All those issues relating to the challenges you face managing contact center and customer care. So today, Noel will lead our discussion on helping agents manage the expansion of customer channels, something that is extremely topical. In fact, Noel was sharing with me the average agent is currently handling 3 to 4 channels, and Gartner predicts by next year, 2020, organizations will need to position themselves to address 12 emerging customer channels. So it's going to get more complex, and Noel's going to help break it down for us a little bit today. Just a little reminders, during the interactive webinar, we'll do a poll question today. We appreciate your participation. We'll share results at the end, but it helps kind of guide the conversation. It helps Noel with where our audience is on all this stuff. So please participate. It's multiple choice, not difficult. Also, throughout the webinar today, if you want to use that questions box on your screen, submit your comments, questions, ideas, thoughts. We'll address as many and deal with them as part of the recording and capture it for the recording. And we'll deal with them at the back end just as much time as we have. We're shooting for 50, 55 minutes, and I'm going to do as little talking as possible so that you don't have to endure this voice. But let me first say welcome back, Noel. Thanks for taking time with us today, and I'll turn it over to you.
All right. Well, thank you very much, David. And welcome everyone. Thank you for joining. So in this talk today, I want to examine how to help your agents with the challenges and the complexity that come from the expansion of customer channels. And I'll put this another way, the increase in channels is really means that the agents are going to need more help. They're going to need more help because more channels are going to make dealing with customers more difficult. And that difficulty or complexity is going to require them to be better enabled, better equipped. And how to do that is going to be through better tools, better agent desktop tools, and really that modernization of the desktop. So in this talk, we're going to look at about 3 things. I'm going to go over how channels cause the complexity. I'm going to look at some of the tools that you can use to help your agents, and then some direction or order in implementing these tools. Okay, so how does channel growth increase complexity for agents? Well, I'd like to start I'd like to highlight a few ways that this is happening. So one is just the sheer complexity that a multitude of agents brings. Handling those channels individually, they each have their own way of having the conversation. So email versus voice or web chat or SMS are all essentially different. Next is the expansion of the bots. So with bots being able to work across other channels, not just voice, that's really starting to peel back some of the simpler tasks and leaving the more complicated tasks for the agents to handle. So the increase in channels is really enabling that bot self-service capability across those channels. Along with bots actually is the handoff to agents piece. It's a new activity and also a new issue, basically, that when bots fail or agents want to, or customers want to move the conversation to an agent, that you have to have that handoff piece that's done well, and that's another area that's a new type of activity that agents have to be able to handle. And of course, there's the infamous and ongoing silo problem. So having more channels means that you might have more siloed technology across different channels and different tools that the agents have to know how to use. So that's the high-level view of the complexity that they're facing. So with that, according to Forrester, agent desktop is one emerging area where many organizations are going to focus in order to make things better in the customer engagement center. They expect about 1/3 of organizations will be modernizing the agent desktop, really in the current year, so within, say, the next 12 months. And this is a real shift from what we've seen even a couple of years ago. We wrote a blog probably, I think, 2 years ago, where we described the desktop as being sort of that neglected or forgotten piece of the contact center. And it really looks like that's starting to change. And then the other piece here with bots, Forrester is saying that 60% of bot implementations they're expecting to fail. And it seems to be kind of cost-driven, that a lot of the bots are being driven to reduce costs. So we're kind of seeing that containment piece, like the old IVR of hide the zero, where bots are really being used to try and offload the self-service from agents and try and contain the customers a bit. And that's causing some problems when bots don't work, and customers are trying to reach an agent, and then they either get sent to an agent with very little information, or if the bot was developed in a silo, there might not even be a path, and then they come in off a different channel, and the agent has no visibility as to what happened prior. So next, going to look at, dive into a bit more around the channel side and the impact of channels in a bit more detail. So this is what David referred to at the beginning, is that Gartner is saying that organizations are going to need to address about 12 emerging channels, and that's up from about 3 or 4 today. And that obviously is really going to have that impact to the agents. And this is just to reinforce what Gartner's seeing and hearing from the industry. So to have a look at what some of those channels look like, this slide is actually slightly modified from a CCNG presentation webinar I think I did probably about a year ago. And it's really just to show the multitude of channels that customers can use, and that some are growing and some are shrinking, and there's a definite shift to digital channels. So key emerging channels include messaging apps, particularly with companies like WhatsApp and Apple, with Apple iMessage. So support for those platforms are recently available from a business perspective. So you can use these messaging platforms to reach enterprises now, and not just individuals. So some of what we're seeing in terms of the shrinkage and the shift is, as voice and email are kind of viewed as shrinking as those kind of high cost channels, and with email, I'd say also hard to manage. It's a channel that seems to be hard to manage. That's really pushing that cost. So again, some of that cost focus towards the lower cost channels, such as chat and self-service bots. And then from the agent side, the agent perspective is, they have lots of channels to contend with. So they have to be adept at working on the different types of channels. They need skills such as typing versus writing, as well as sort of that channel culture, so the etiquette and vocabulary that's appropriate. They need to be able to handle multiple digital channels simultaneously, preferably not more than two, typically as a guideline, but that does factor into the lowering of the cost of the digital channels. And with omni-channel, there's that switching between channels aspect. So know how to switch from one channel to another easily, and for agents to know when it's appropriate to move a customer from one channel to another. And then also agents will have to be able to work with multiple channels at the same time. So this is often called multimodal, and this is where you could have agents that could be on a call, but they're also dealing with an authentication step or a password reset that needs to be done, but you're not going to ask them for their password over the phone necessarily. You might SMS them that password reset, which has a link in it. Click on the link, maybe from their phone, and it goes to a browser. And all of those channels really have to work together, and the agents have to be familiar with that moving forward. So that's the multimodal aspect. So obviously all of this stuff combined is helping to make things pretty complicated for agents. On the bot side, this is a stat from Gartner that basically is saying that there's an expectation of bots to be involved in about 85% of all interactions. So full or partial, 85% would there be a bot element to that, and so that's a pretty significant piece, and the bots are actually a fairly significant component of that. So it's expected that the chatbots will make up about 30% of the self-service component by that 2022 timeframe. So it's pretty important to get things right with bots. Okay, so the chatbot piece, what chatbots do is they really remove some of that simple set of tasks from agents, and they do so because the AI piece actually allows bots to tackle some of the more complex self-service that you might have done with a typical voice-based IVR, and they can tackle those more complicated kinds of interactions, and they can do so across nearly all channels. Maybe not email, but across a lot of those channels. And so really, this is pulling back some of the types of simple tasks that agents are going to face, and leave them with those issues that require that deeper investigation. And then, as we saw earlier, just from the bot implementation failures from that Forrester stat, that with those bot projects not succeeding very well, that's adding a level of problem, right, for agents to handle. And that does really seem to be that cost-driven focus that seems to be driving the bot development behavior today, which is causing these problems. So on the silo side, if we talk about silos for a bit, it's the next major hurdle. One study has shown that agents spend only about 40% of their time actually working on tasks with customers, leaving that other 60% as being not very productive. So about a third, or just over a third of that time, seems to be spent, according to this study, searching around for the right information in various systems, and hunting and pecking really for that information. And another 15% seems to be spent doing repetitive or manual tasks, like entering in notes in multiple systems or copying and pasting data. And then there's an additional 10% reaching out to specialists or leads. So about 10% of an agent's time connecting with other people. And while you can't reduce this time to zero, this unproductive time, it definitely looks like there's plenty of room for improvement here. So with silos, I kind of look at this as 4 different types of silos, and ways of looking within your organization and seeing what's acting as an obstacle for you and for your agents. There's the channel silos, which is really where you have technology that are handling different channels. So you might have a contact center system that's handling voice, and chat may be handled in another system. And there might even be 2 different systems for chat, each with a different behavior. So in the business application silos, so the second type of silos, there's 2 elements here, and one goes back to the channel silos. There could be different systems, again, like the contact center application handling voice, or email and chat being handled by a CRM system, or maybe chat again with social being handled by a marketing application. So if you've got these different business applications handling different channels, that's a way that that these business applications are segmenting and causing problems for agents. And another way of looking at it is with kind of business applications that are siloed because of function. So you might have the CRM being the customer knowledge repository, might be the system of engagement, versus a billing system or a dispatch application. And they could be operating in independently and not well connected of each other. So an example of this is we have a company where we saw the agents get provided within the CRM a limited 2-week delivery schedule for delivering products for customers, actually shipping it to them. And that 2-week is what limitation within the CRM. And if they need to go beyond 2 weeks, then what they were doing was going to their Outlook email system and looking at spreadsheets that were being emailed on several times a day, basically every few hours, to look at the loads and things on some of the routes and what shipping dates are still available. Or they'd have to call right into the dispatch office and talk to somebody to get that figured out. So this is an example of the business systems being siloed. Another example is the customer data being siloed. So not many organizations have that sort of golden record kept somewhere in one system. And so customer data can appear in multiple systems. And it's difficult sometimes for agents to know which is the right info, which is most up to date, hasn't gone stale, and may have to confirm an update with the customer because they might be seeing different information in different systems. So that's customer data. And then the last one is more around business process. And this is where the process is often siloed. So like a transaction, like buying something and having it delivered as a single transaction, might not have that oversight, and each different line of business might have an element of this overarching process. So again, like the delivery situation, if the driver tries to deliver the parcel, that if there's a nasty dog in the yard, or the truck breaks down, or for some reason that parcel doesn't get delivered, then is that information being made available, and how smoothly is it being made available back in the system in the other line of business, the customer service area, for them to know. So yeah, so then that's a lot of the looking at some of the issues that in some depth that are causing the complexity for the agent. So to turn this around, so now what do we need to do? Well, we need to equip the agent properly. And how can we equip the agent? Well, focus on this talk is going to be on the agent desktop piece. And another component is the better implementation of bots. So that needs to be done as well as a lead up into supporting the agent. And so after the poll question, I think we'll dive into the modern desktop tools a little bit more, and I'll pass it back to David for the poll question.
Great, thank you. Poll question today: are you planning changes to the desktop to better enable your agents? Something tells me you better be, and I have a question or two on the back end that I'll ask, but we'll start the poll question now. It's, again, multiple choice. Appreciate your participation. It's pretty easy peasy, but we'd very, very much like you to participate, and then we'll share those results towards the end, and we'll ask for Noel to give us his perspective. So go ahead, Noel.
Okay, well, thanks, David. So what we'll do is we'll look at the tools, and we'll look at the chatbot piece first, just with one slide. It just does that supporting piece that's required. So what needs to happen on the chatbot side is that we need to build these better chatbots, need to look at that automation, implementing the automation slowly, not trying to take on too much, and give time for customers and agents to adapt to the technology. For chatbots to be successful, they need to be easy to use, both in the providing of the self-service piece, which is obviously what we want to use them for, but also in that handing things over to the agent. So they need to be designed really with the understanding that they're going to reach their limits often. They are going to fail, and the bots need to be built with that in mind, and also knowing that customers will want to talk to someone and they'll want to have an easy path from the bot to a live agent. So again, let's not kind of hide the zero, kind of the old IVR term of kind of hiding the zero, that ability to get to an agent. Let's build that right in and make it easy. So you have to do a bit at a time. You have to learn from what you do with the bot, fail forward. So don't be afraid to fail and move the bot forward, and then grow from there. And then the responsibility is on the bot side to pass the right information, the right relevant information. So things like what's the matched intent that the customer is trying to communicate. And if their intent isn't matched, then information about that failure, and that needs to be passed through. And you're going to want to ensure that agents have a stake in the automation of the chatbot. They have that familiarity with the customer and their requests, and also to some degree really with the way to speak to a customer and some of that knowledge. So now I'll dive into more of the agent's enablement tools. And there are 4 aspects here we're going to look at. We're going to start with that foundational piece, the CX application as a platform, and then look at layering things on top of that for efficiency, effectiveness, and those prescriptive tools. So with this slide here, we're going to come back to this slide at the end and talk about the different layering and some of the order of things and how to tackle it, and maybe what to tackle first, and look at it and group them and look at them in these levels of maturity. Okay, so the customer experience platform. Really, with this foundation, this customer experience foundation, need to look at having 1 to 2 systems really at the core of what you have. It's not to say that you're not going to have other systems, but try and pick and have the core nugget, if you will, of what you're building your customer experience capabilities on around 1 or 2 platforms. So maybe a contact center platform, say like Genesys Pure Cloud, and then a CRM, say something like Salesforce. And you may have a lot of channels in one versus the other, or you may look at having channels all managed by one system, but really you're going to need to connect these systems together well in order to have that platform that works. And really the contact center piece, that platform can be really that sort of the getting it there part, sort of really around the routing, the channel handling, and getting the customer connected to the right agent. And then with the system of engagement, or that CRM piece, is really that getting it done part that the agent needs to have as their tool to be able to get the work, the right work done. And so that platform needs to include a bunch of capabilities. So when we talk about this these foundational elements, you need to be able to capture the inquiries, so that inquiry history, need to be able to help the agent with the task at hand, need to enable a case management and workflow, so across multiple tasks. Knowledge management should be present and have that capability of capturing the knowledge. On the omni-channel side, that this platform needs to be able to cover all the channels really that the agent can use, and needs to tie that really from an agent's perspective in that unified desktop, that single desktop application in front of them. And for the completeness of the platform, that last bullet, it's now getting into that besides having these capabilities, the platform also needs to have, well, the feature richness that we listed above, but it might not all be inherent in the platforms. So for that, the technology platforms you choose need to have the ability to add on, either through App Store or vendor partnerships. Definitely seeing a lot of growth in the App Store concept with a lot of the contact center vendors. Salesforce is obviously a really good example with their App Exchange. Genesys is also building one with App Foundry, and others have their stores as well. And then the third piece is an API layer. So for more granular differentiation and features or capabilities, you need to have that API openness that the platform should be able to provide you. And it's good for do-it-yourself type organizations. So I think this is, if you like to get your hands dirty and build some functionality yourself, then you need this. But also to be able to glue disparate applications together. So if you've got these 1 or 2 platform systems as your core, you're still going to have to tie them into other business systems that the organization uses. So next is kind of getting into the efficiency tools. So now we're starting to layer things on top of that foundation. And the core element here from an agent perspective is that single pane of glass, which really means unifying the agent desktop and not having them have lots of different screens. And I was looking for a stat. I thought I had one where it estimated how many screens agents have in front of them, and there are definitely a lot of customers that we see that have 2, 3, 4, even a dozen or so applications that they might have that agents need to understand and use, and that just becomes really unwieldy. So need to try and drive that focus to that single pane of glass. And in that pane, you're going to want to do things to to make them more efficient, such as highlight relevant data that they need, and also be able to take that data we talked about on the bot side and pull that data in and help show the agent that this is a bot piece. This is a continuation of a bot interaction, and have that happen smoothly. So, if they were trying to buy flowers, let's say through the bot, and it didn't work out, the address wasn't picked up properly, maybe it was a complicated address name, you'd like the agent to be able to just sort of say something like, I see our bot was having trouble understanding your delivery address. Let me help you with that so we can get those flowers sent. And then you just help with the address, and then the process is essentially finished, and off it goes, and it becomes a lot more seamless to the agent, and the failure doesn't become that big of a deal. Then there's the task and process guidance, so really breaking processes down into tasks and helping to handhold the agent through the process. And then robotic process automation, which can mimic keystrokes that an agent would do manually. And we'll dive into these two a little bit more in depth, the guidance and the RPA. So for task guidance is really about helping the agent steer the engagement with the customer. So around the task, there are really 3 steps that need to be looked at. There's the identification of the task, there's actually doing the task, and then there's some post-task activity. But the 2 main ones are identifying the task and actually doing the task. So when we're trying to identify the task, guidance really needs to be done here to help the agent. Some examples, it could be providing the IVR exit point or that bot identified intent, but even more guidance or helping the agent along, such as the customer authentication process. If you have 3 or 4 questions that you ask, sometimes say from my bank, they have a pool of questions, maybe 10 or so questions that they can ask the customer, and they have to get past 4 of them in order for the customer to be considered authenticated. So you can turn this into a guidance piece for the agent and making sure that they properly authenticate the customer and do the proper level of authentication that's required. The other thing is that the agent needs consumable information, that correct or that relevant information about the customer and the context. And I think there's maybe a principle here where the information that you should show in front of your agents can be broken down into 4 different types of information. There's the information about the purpose or the intent of the interaction, so that's the what are they contacting about. There's the customer profile piece or the persona, that's more of the who. And then there's the dynamic elements of the customer, so the current customer context, such as have they booked a flight, have they checked into a flight, that sort of dynamic information that's important. And then there's the company context, and that's if the company is a service provider and there's a service outage, that sort of thing, then you want the agent to be aware of that, as that can come into play in some of the interactions that they're going to have. So those are sort of the four key pieces of how I think that one pane of glass needs to be thought of in terms of bringing that information forward. And then along with that is supporting information, such as the relevant past information or past interaction history, and bring that forward regardless of the channel. So if you're talking on voice, but the previous interaction happened via chat, then that needs to be brought forward if it's a relevant interaction that happened. Any open cases that might exist, or purchase history, that sort of thing also could be supporting information that needs to be brought forward. So when working on the task side, so that whole previous piece we talked about is more about the identification step, identifying what the task is. Now, once that's done and you're working on the task, then there's guidance that can be given, such as what Salesforce has, for example, with Visual Flow. They have a way of guiding the agent through the task by breaking it down into steps, and you can show arrows across the top, and what step are you at can be highlighted, and you know that you're at step 2 or step 3 in a 4-step task that you're doing. And then they can narrow what the agent needs to focus on for each of those steps, and that helps to bring it all forward and bring it in front of the agent, and they don't have to go elsewhere. And this really ties back to a lot of that 50% or so of the time that the agents spend hunting and pecking and looking for things. If we can reorient what they see and break things down, you can greatly reduce the amount of time that agents spend. While it's good to have the task piece like this broken down into steps, it's also important not to make it be a rule, a forced process necessarily, that the agent, there could be reasons why they have to break out of that task and do other things, so don't make it so rigid that they can't do that. Okay, so now a bit more depth on the robotic process automation, which is really this technology that mimics the agents, lets them do basic tasks across different systems. Helps remove these mundane tasks, and really again goes to reducing some of that 50% of the non-productive time. And so, for example, you could have RPA do things like address or do an address change. If they're trying to change the address, then the agent enters it in one system. The RPA can trigger off of that and see that what you're trying to do is change an address, and can automatically enter that data into all the other systems to keep the data up to date, which makes things more accurate and fewer chance of errors, and also reduces the agent time. And RPA generally plugs integration gaps between systems. So this is a way that without doing all that back-end integration and waiting for that back-end integration to be done, that you can fairly quickly implement these automations at the desktop, basically mimicking mouse clicks and copy-paste type functionality, and things that don't require a lot of coding. And while this could end up eventually being done in back-end integration over time, we do feel that there'll be a constant need for RPA as things change for organizations, as organizations change to support those ongoing customer demands. Being able to be agile and dynamic, RPA will help with that. And then obviously you just have to be cognizant of the fact that as we peel off a lot of these easier things that agents do, that there can be an element of the amount of work that's harder to do in that area of burnout, and being careful of that. So breaks and things that are needed, and variety in the work that they do. Okay, so into effectiveness tools. So just here we have a few. So VEAs, so these are really bots for agents instead of bots that are facing customers. So this helps speed things up, because an agent could do things like ask the bot, show me the last 3 purchases this customer did over $500, or did the customer open a ticket about product X? instead of having to go find that information somewhere. So the VEA is kind of that digital buddy that can help the agent along. And taking that a step further is a cognitive search. And this is where the VEA can actually listen to what's going on in the conversation. So think of a bot that's transcribing the conversation and capturing that and looking for key things, trying to match certain things that it's noticing, maybe guessing at some of the activity that needs to happen and bringing that information forward for the agent. So the agent doesn't even have to do the typing or ask the bot questions, let alone go and hunt for information. And then another one is the agent-employee collaboration. So this is a pretty big deal as things become more complicated, and that 10% of the agent time spent going and talking to other people, I don't think that time is going to go down by much, but you're probably going to want to try and avoid it going up and consuming more time. And part of what we see is good collaboration tools internally within the organization will be important, so that an agent could bring in specialists across maybe multiple teams even, and use them to help solve customer issues. And then, of course, with just-in-time training, we need to keep the training up to date, keep the agents actively learning, and this can help reduce the amount of classroom time and that sheer overwhelming aspect that new agents can sometimes experience when they're having to try and learn everything. Okay, and then lastly here is the prescriptive tools. So next best action is something that's been bandied about a fair bit, and behavioral guidance is another one. I should take a step back, actually, that what we mean by prescriptive is that these are tools that, while they use AI, like some of the other tools we've talked about in previous slides, they're really trying to learn from and detect patterns from past data in your system, so past activities and interactions that you've had with your customers. And so next best action is really trying to proactively provide the next suggestion, or the suggestion of the next thing to do based on what it has seen work, what its AI has seen work well in the past. And so this is different than the task guidance we talked about before, because the guidance is really more the way that you've designed the process and think that it's going to work. And then the next best action is really designed to work off of learning from that history and maybe make suggestions of what other tasks might be appropriate and bring that forward. So Salesforce with Einstein is an example of this. They have a way that in the top right corner of your Salesforce screen, it can show you some suggestions of what to do. And then there could be another task that it's suggesting with a button, and you could click on that, and then your screen could change and you can start to follow a different task. I'll say this is kind of in its infancy, so this is definitely new technology worth keeping an eye on. And then behavioral guidance. So this is listening to the conversation that's going on, determine the sentiment of the customer, and use what it detects to raise awareness with the agent to help the agent better understand and empathize with the customer. And then to do all of these things, because it's based on that history, you do need that customer analytics piece. You need some of that data. You need to be able to look at some of the patterns and things and have that ability to capture the data, analyze it, and let AI work from it. All right, so on the last slide here, it's really how do we try and layer this in a way that might work for you. Now, obviously, all companies have different differences and different challenges and things. So it's going to be a pretty high-level generalization here. But starting at the bottom, you do want to choose the right foundation and look at what's the right combination of platforms that you should use. And that can be either with what you have today, or looking at acquiring something new and getting you there. And the acquiring something new can be a longer process. It could take several months to get through that process. So it might not work for everybody to go down that path, but at least you can. If you can't do the new acquisition, then look at the tools that you have. You might have advanced tools today that stand out that you could pick and use those. And then a core thing here would be to make sure that you connect. If you've got a couple of systems like a contact center system and a main CRM that agents use, is to make sure that at least those two systems are well connected. So if out of the silos, if you're going to break them down, make sure that those two are well connected. And that way, so trigger events and data, that really needs to be able to flow between them in order to make them work well. So you have to be able to react to triggers on the one side from the system on the other, and you need to be able to pass data properly back and forth between those two systems. So next is with that foundation in place, is what we have to do is leverage the capabilities that around the efficiency and try and avoid some of that hunting and pecking time that the agents do. So try and look at some of these things that could help you reduce that agent time, and look inside of those systems that you have today. So some of them might have mechanisms already to help with configuring the agent screen. You might have ways that you can bring information forward dynamically to the agent right within the tools of the platforms that the main platforms that you've chosen. And then taking that another layer further is that you want to layer on some of the effectiveness tools. So the VEA or cognitive search, or those collaboration tools. Maybe the collaboration tools are the things we're seeing most common, as there might be a unified communication and collaboration, so a UCC type of platform also available that's being used, or you can use some of that capability right within the customer experience platform that you've got. So it could either be the agent specific or contact center supporting tools, or there might be enterprise tools that you have outside of the contact center already in place today that you could use. Another thing with the integration of the different systems, the RPA is a key piece of glue that you can consider, and that might be one of those areas that can help you, at least even in the short term, if you do have a multitude of systems, be able to connect them together. And then moving up to the last on the prescriptive side, so next best action and emotional behavioral guidance. Some of this might be relatively new, so you might want to just keep an eye on where this is headed. If you're pretty advanced and you have some advanced tools, then this becomes something worth implementing. But it's important to note that you have to collect data, make sure you've got a good set of customer data before that can work. And with that, I think we're done. So sorry it took a bit longer today than I was expecting, so hopefully that's all right. And I'll pass it back to you, Dave, to deal with some of the questions.
No, I'm my voice and I'm pretty sure the audience are appreciative. They didn't have to hear much from me. You covered a lot of ground, and we really appreciate that. There's a lot of discussion about this stuff from every angle, and whether it's improving customer experience or impacting the agent's work, helping to address issues like attrition, retention, all of that stuff. So thank you. I know it was long, and I greatly appreciate it. And I know people will be referring back to this over time. Let me kick it off with our poll results. Thank you for those who participated. Looks like the bulk, something, let's see, 60, 70, 88% of the people, I'm sorry, let me get that. They're working on it now or planning to work on it in the future, some 65, 75% of the people. So most of the people are looking at how to position in the future. Several had completed some of this stuff over a year ago. Does that jive with what you're seeing in the industry in terms of, how people are adapting to this?
So it sounds like you're saying 75% are looking at it, and another chunk have already done some activity in the past.
Yes.
That's a pretty significant difference from what Forrester was saying, with about the 1/3 or so that are probably working on it this year. So I'd say the audience are really looking to be ahead of the curve on some of what is happening in the industry.
Well, I picked up on your failures for chatbots and stuff, and I'd like you to chat a little bit more about that. But let me start with this question: low-hanging fruit. What are you seeing as the starting point, pain points that people are looking to address as they start to implement more channels? What are you seeing that this audience could relate to?
So what the low-hanging fruit is in terms of tackling with bots? Well, I'd say that there are probably a couple of different things. If you've got chat already in place, if you're handling chats today, then you can go straight into working with bots. And then I would say that you'd want to pick an area of focus that's got a high volume of transaction that your customers do that you think could be handled via the bot. You might not want to start with that, but you want to have a look and make sure that when you move into the bot territory, you're going to have 2 or 3 really high value intents that you can tackle. So for example, in the medical waste company that we do work with, there's 2 main things they deal with. It's transportation, like reschedules or scheduling a pickup, that sort of thing, cancellations, or billing, payments and billing. And so you can pretty quickly see that there's a couple of specialty areas that bots could work with to really help offload some of that activity, but you'll want to probably pick something smaller to just try with your customers and make sure that you understand that your customer base well and how they react to bots, and get that working within the system within your organization. So I'd say, look, make sure you've got those big ticket items because if you have things like that, where I think 60% of their interactions are those 2 areas alone, it's very ripe for value of bots. But then don't jump into doing the big thing right away. Try and tackle something smaller. And we did that with this one client, just to test the waters with how customers would respond.
Thanks for those who are posting questions. We're going to get to as many as the next 3 or 4 minutes allow. So that may be a nice lead into this question, which is, do you see the desktop modernization projects as large projects, or are they typically broken down into smaller chunks? In other words, how's the best way to tackle these projects?
Yeah, so I think it's going to depend where you're coming from. And the 2 main places, I think, sort of starting points are you going to be using systems you already have in place, or are you maybe stuck with some older siloed technology that you need to make that foundational leap? And if you need to make that foundational leap, then that's usually a fairly large project because you've got a technology replacement project to tackle. But even if you do that, you might be able to not do sort of a big bang, try and tackle some of that shifting to a new technology in smaller components. But But that's usually the biggest project element, is that shift to a new technology. And then after that, it's really an ongoing process. You're going to want to tackle things like, how do I make my the data clearer and more accessible to my agents? How do I change the screen? How do I tack on some of these other capabilities? And some of those will be smaller projects. And then as you go through that low-hanging fruit, smaller projects with fairly big bang, then you'll start to get into some bigger projects again with maybe trying to implement the VEA or some of those kinds of things.
Right. I'm going to combine these two questions to give you one more shot at answering this, because it really deals with the people side of stuff. It says it'd be hard to convince my organization to make the desktop a priority. Any recommendations on how to address this with my management? And let me add this other question into that. How does this impact, that being more channels, impact the hiring process or the training process? So I sense that they're dealing with people issues and trying to make it a priority to improve the agent experience. Do you have some insights on that?
Yeah, so I think with the making desktop a priority is, if there's a way to go back to that 50-60% time and measure time that your agents are spending that's not productive. So either, even if you have to do it manually by watching agents, or if you can do screen recordings from your quality assurance system and try and get a sense and highlight some statistical information that can help change the priority of this within the organization. Because there definitely should be a fair bit of time that's being spent that could be turned into math, right, into an ROI, or even a high-level just list of saying that there's a lot of time here. Here's some even anecdotal data. I need to go do a deeper dive. If that doesn't work, then I'd say the next best thing is you're kind of stuck with what priorities are there today, and then you're going to have to try and piggyback desktop improvements on other projects that are being done today. And I'd say especially bot projects. If you've got bot projects, then trying to shift that so that they're not doing the bot in silos and have to acknowledge that there's an agent handoff piece. That'll open up the desktop, and you should be able to then try and work in some other benefits for the agents. And
go ahead, sorry.
No, I was going to try and get to the second part, which I think was...
Yeah, I was going to say, making that a priority, does it, are you seeing that it's having an impact on hiring and training for the agents?
Yeah, because I think the churn rate, right? Like, I think one of the key things is that contact centers are vying for an agent pool, and agents are leaving, some organizations because of the complexity that happens in the training. I mean, if your training takes, 3 months to get through, or even 6 weeks to get through, when you've got a churn rate of, so many churning every 6 months, then you're not really able to kind of keep your agents in check. You're going to have a large percentage of relatively inexperienced agents. So yeah, if you can address the desktop, then the training time should be able to go down quite significantly, and then it should help with that agent churn.
Good. Well, I think most people we hear from know that they're headed in this direction. They don't want to get in too soon, but they also don't want to be late to the game for many of the reasons you just discussed. We're up against the clock here, so I'm going to hold the questions. If we didn't get to your question, feel free to submit it to us through email. You'll be getting an email with the link for this webinar, so I'm going to encourage you to do that. And if there is information that you're looking for through the slides, they are attached here. Again, anything you need from us, please let us know. You can also visit ccg.com for information on upcoming events and programs, stuff we're doing with Noel and Aria, as well as others. So we welcome you to share your thoughts on Twitter. I think there's an announcement that may be up there right now, so feel free to do that. Noel, thanks for taking time with us today. You always give us more than we ask for, and you did it again today in spades. So thank you so much for really sharing all of this. We'll be referring to this information, no doubt, for many, many months to come. Thank you again.
All right. Thanks, David.
Take care.
I know.